Welcome to OTCM. I'm Chris, and in this video we've come out of the workshop and taken over the spare room in the house to get the end boards up and running. I'm currently building a 20-foot by 10-foot exhibition layout called A Dreary Tuesday, which is based in South Yorkshire, and these boards will form the curves that take trains between the Scenic section and the fiddle yard. I've designed it, as you can see, so the curves can also be put together themselves to create a test track. The curves themselves have been cut from two 8x4 sheets of plywood and have a plywood frame. I covered off the building of these in one of my earlier videos on the subject. I think it was the second one in the series. But since then I've been working around the curves, laying the track. There's obviously still some painting to be done on these baseboards to get them finished, but with the track laid and all wired up, I have, for the first time ever, got a test track where I can actually run some prototypical trains as they would feature on the layout itself. That's obviously massively exciting, feels like a real step forward, even though it's a pretty minor milestone in the overall construction of the layout. But in this video I'm going to focus on some of those trains. Let's take a look at them, see what we think they're going to be, where they're going to be running from and to, what they're formed of and how they've been built. As you can see, the curves consist of a double track laid in Pico code 75. At the points at which it goes out into the Scenic section, this transitions into C&L flexi track and then transitions back into Pico again at the other end of the Scenic section. I've also just got a DCC controller wired up temporarily at the moment, just to allow us to run some things. Round the back we have a single crossover. This is to allow trains which come out the sidings and terminate in the fiddle yard to run back and get onto the correct line to enter back onto the layout. And then the tracks widen out at this side to allow them to run out onto the fiddle yard, and there's a wider spacing because of the three waypoints that sit on the fiddle yard, which split the tracks out into the various different fiddle yard roads. That's about as exciting as things get in terms of the baseboards and the track laid on them. There isn't really very much to these. They're as narrow as they can be to allow me to keep them stored in the minimal possible space. The overall size of the curves is about 8 foot across the circle. So the track work on the layout, we're running at something like a 3'10" radius curve on the outside, about 3'8" on the inside, which is absolutely fine for my stock, which will use is 3-link couplings, but I wouldn't really want to go any tighter than that. So that's about it really, nothing particularly exciting, but a really key part of the overall layout. So let's take a look at some of the trains we're going to be running. This isn't a comprehensive look at every train, but I'll try and cover off some of the interesting ones, some of the key flows across what will be the final layout. So the first train we're looking at is an empty iron ore service, and this has 2 Class 37s at the head of it, and it's formed of 10 PTA wagons. This is quite an interesting train. Obviously it's empty, so this is coming away from the steelworks, and it would be in reality heading back to Immingham for reloading. So the Immingham Scunthorpe services, when they first started, were hauled by pairs of Class 37s, and this is a continuation of that. It's presumed that that flow was also extended through to the steelworks on my layout, and in reality the steelworks would have been refitted during the very early 1970s to permit the tipping of PTA wagons such as these, which have rotary couplings, and you push them through a unloading house, the entire wagon swivels round and you unload the ore. Coming the other way we have a loaded ore service. Again, this is formed of 10 PTA wagons with a pair of Class 37s on, albeit slightly different Class 37s and slightly different ore wagons. So the 2 Class 37s at the front of this train are both V-Trains models, which have been modified by myself and backdated with the earlier cab fronts with the cowls behind the buffer beam, while the wagons in this train are Accurascale PTA tipplers, and they've been backdated to the original livery that was used on the Teesside to Concept flow when that was first introduced. Slightly off patch working in South Yorkshire, but I've assumed that either A, the rake has been diverted, or B, the wagons are on loan to the sort of Scunthorpe area, and therefore running in Immingham to Dearne Valley flow. As you can see, the empty train is somewhat different. These are Lima PTA wagons, which have been modified to have new bogies fitted that are the correct dimensions, because the ones Lima fitted were a hopeless rendition of the prototype. So we've got new bogies fitted to these, and they've also undergone quite a lot of other work to bring them up to standard. They have solid brass floors in them, which adds plenty of weight. The 237s on the front of this are both split box examples, and they're both Bachmann models, which I have lowered slightly to make them look better and given them a full array of buffer beam pipework and proper head codes for the flows. Moving on to coal traffic now, and things don't become much more iconic in terms of moving coal in the 1970s than a brush type 4 class 47 in BR blue on a rake of HAA hoppers, as they later became, Hop 32 ABs as they were during my time period, better known as the MGR hopper. The loco here is a Bachmann example, and it has been repainted by myself into BR blue from a much later time period. Bought it very cheap back in the day when you used to be able to buy brand new locos for £50, specifically with the idea of repainting it into blue, and followed that through. So it's been backdated, it's had its high intensity headlight filled in, the head code box is reopened up and added instead of being steel beam, and yes, I know it still has the wrong fuel tanks on it. The wagons in this rake are all the old Hornby examples, which have been picked up cheaply second hand over the years. These have been modified in a couple of simple ways. So firstly, they've had new buffers fitted from Lanarkshire models. Secondly, they've been fitted with scale instancer couplings, usually using Smiths as per the rest of my stock. And finally, they've had Allen Gibson 14mm disc wheels fitted, which are the correct size rather than the Hornby ones, which are under scale. I'm hoping to produce a future video on the modifications to the wagons, which should be quite an interesting affair, but they've all been done on a budget, and none of these wagons owes me more than £10. Obviously things here aren't quite complete, so the wagons are all missing numbers. These are all produced on my computer. I just need to get around to arranging to get them printed as custom decals. And also I need to add a layer of real coal over the top of the parkside loads, which has just been added as a base for the wagon load to be finished on top of. I've got two rakes of 18 wagons for the layout, both from the old Hornby wagons, one loaded and one empty, obviously one going in each direction. They'll be running coal traffic out of Corton Wood or Elsicar collieries out onto the main line. Although the train length 18 wagons is well short of what the prototype rakes would have been on these in the era modelling, I think 18 still conveys the feeling of a long train and certainly avoids it swamping the layout, means that it actually travels some distance from one end of the scenic section to the other, rather than overwhelming the layout, which would be the case if it was actually a scale rake. Next up we have a Class 31. This has been repainted from a Hornby BR Blue example into Lake Green with the BR arrows, as a number of this class ran with in the era I'm modelling. The train here consists of a mix of empty steel wagons heading back to the steelworks. We've got some tubes, some plates, a variety of trestle wagons, bow plate, and those sort of types of wagons that would be typical mixed together, being trip worked back to the steelworks by a less powerful loco such as a Class 31. Coming the other way, a pair of Helgen Class 76s, both multi-working air brake fitted examples, are running into the steelworks with a empty rake of what later became BAA wagons. These have been kit built from Cambrian kits. The Bachmann examples are a bit too expensive for my liking, and again this has been upgraded with Lanarkshire buffers and a couple of other small detail improvements over the original Cambrian examples. The pair of tube wagons behind the Class 31 are from different origins. One is a Bachmann ready-to-run example, while the other is built from a Parkside kit. The Tress Troll wagon is a pair of Bachmann well trolls that have been glued together to make an exceptionally long wagon, while the plate wagons are all from a mix of Parkside kits, either the Tress Trolls or the flat plates. And the bow plates are two of them. These are both from Cambrian kits. Finally, a Bachmann 20-ton BR standard brake van brings up the rear of the train. Taking a look at the other side of the air braked train, this would have been brand new wagons just introduced into traffic at the end of 1972. See, I'm modelling January 1973, so it would be almost brand new, though it's still weathered slightly. As you can see, these are still waiting decals as well. They're on the same sheet as those for the MGR hoppers, just haven't got around to getting them printed yet. Once this is done, they'll be weathered down ever so slightly to take the sheen off the wagons and make them look a bit like they've been used. And they may also get some loads as the wagons are a bit on the light side at the moment. Next up, we've got another mixed rake of steel wagons heading to the steelworks, and this one is hauled by a single vac braked Class 76. The first couple of wagons are coil A's from a Curascow, followed by a couple of shock hoods from Bachmann, and then we have a mixed rake of bolsters which are from a variety of origins, kit built from Red Panda kits, some detailed Lima, some Bachmann ready to run, and Daypole ready to run in there. Coming the other way is a single Class 20 on a coal train, passing some rather good stout. This is a mix of 21-ton open wagons which are built from Parkside kits, some of which have been modified into the later design. 21-ton hoppers, both earlier examples and rebuilt ones from Parkside kits, and also ready-to-run models from Hornby, and some 16-ton mineral wagons which are Bachmann models that have been weathered quite considerably. Huge variety of stock and rust in this train, and it's brought up on the back by a Hornby 20-ton LMS brake van. Finally, by far not the last train that will operate on the layout, but the last one I'll cover off in this video, in the interest of it not becoming boring. We've got a 08 4033 which was allocated to Woodhead Depot, and that's hauling a rake of Curascow 24.5-ton coal hoppers, which again have been weathered and rusted quite considerably, and then treated to loads. In case you hadn't realised by now, weathering up and rusting mineral wagons is one of my favourite topics. Well, that more or less covers where we are in terms of the end boards and the curves around between the fiddle yard and the layout. So what we'll do now is we'll head back out to the shed and have a look at the scenic section, see how we've been getting on in there over the last couple of months. Back in the workshop looking at the scenic section, there really hasn't been very much progress since the last video. I've been struggling for inspiration a bit, and obviously the nice weather provides a distraction, keeps you out of the shed, and it's been a bit too warm in here as well, getting really warm in the afternoon when the shed's in full sun. So progress hasn't been particularly fast on the scenic section, but I have made some progress. At the front of the layout, I've now put the polystyrene in place, or the foam in place, to make the ground contours. As you can see, as we run along the front of the layout, we now have a embankment that's taken shape, that runs all the way along. Hopefully this has captured a sort of look of a gently rolling countryside, dropping away slightly from the railway and then building back up again towards the far end where the new bridge is. That's just a mock-up at the moment. We'll take a look at that in a moment. So at the left-hand end of the scenic section, which would be the west on the real life, we've got a slight raised section just to take the edge off the line going to the fiddle yard, and the ground sort of naturally drops away towards the rear, the lower sidings at the back being on slightly lower levels, that will drop across there. I might take this down slightly further just to see how things look. At the moment it feels a little bit on the high side still for something that's in a relatively flat area. As the ground at the front goes along the layout heading east, the ground level drops away ever so slightly. It wasn't actually like this on the prototype, but I really wanted a scene where I could take pictures of locos and trains at a slightly higher level and get people to look at trains on an embankment. It's relatively rarely modelled, so really keen to introduce that. So that's what I've done. I've had a little bit of a break from reality there, but it's quite satisfying because the ground level just drops away naturally ever so slightly along the entire course of the layout before ramping back up the other end. At the eastern end of the layout, the track is going to disappear under Brampton Road. This was or is a prototype road that would cross the line at this place. I've managed to find a few pictures of the prototype bridge and been able to modify that. It had some absolutely excellent graffiti on it during the miners' strike. If I can find a picture, I will share it as part of this video. What I've done is modified that bridge, so in reality it crossed the railway, which was only a single track, but it had a twin arch span, or a twin girder span I should say, and then on the left hand side it had a second smaller portal which carried it over the stream, which is what we'll run through on this. What I've then done is add a third slightly separate structure which will be in a different finish, which will carry the industrial line out into the fiddle yard this end. At the front, again, I need to cut the wood back, but I've tried to shape the landform here so it looks like the road going over the road bridge is on an embankment. Then we have a second embankment that runs down the front of the layout that drops away down onto natural ground height, which is slightly higher than the railway, which again is in a slight cutting at this point, but only shallow. So quite a lot of complicated shapes and gradients going on in there. And hopefully it will become more clear as scenery comes, but it's a bit hard to get on video, but the land drops down in this direction quite steeply. That's the embankment that Brampton Road is built up on to get over the road bridge, given it's quite a flat landscape. This vertical section here will have the wing wall for the bridge on it. Then we've got this area here, which is the natural land height. That's the railway sort of natural cutting. And then from this point here onwards, the land starts sloping up towards the front of the layout. And what that's doing is an embankment coming down from the main road at the top. And that drop down, in reality, it was the entrance to Cortonwood Colliery. And the idea is that is slightly off scene, but we still see the embankment for it. And it runs down all the way off the front of the layout. I've incorporated a flat area here. This is where the signal box is going to be located. I'm going to use a 1950s style BR signal box, I think. And as you can see, I've left the ground height lower by about 9mm from the track bed. The idea being that I can build the signal box on a sub base, something like so. And that will just drop into place and then it can be merged into the scenery. As you can see, I've cut it into the embankment side here. That'll be finished in brick or stone, and again on this side it's actually built up on a sort of brick support around there, which again will be a retaining wall, so the signal box will sort of be half in a brick line cutting and half on a brick lined embankment, and then the land drops away quite rapidly away from there down onto the embankment where the railway runs. At the baseboard joints, I realised I'd cut the formers for the landscape a bit too steep. Didn't look natural at all for the cutting sides. So what I've done is I've gone along with some bits of foam board, cut them to the shape of the original wooden former, and just built that up. At the front, I was originally planning on having a stream here. I don't think that works at all. The stream is now going to be behind the main line. It'll be in a culvert at this point. So what I've done is just block those up again with a bit of foam board. These will then be integrated into scenery, and I'll obviously backfill the gap behind it, which we'll come on to in a bit. On the other baseboard joint, if we just shoot up the layout, again, exactly the same thing, just some very small foam board inserts there just to level the scenery out against the track bed. So the next job is going to be to fill the voids where the wooden formers run up the middle of the bits of foam. So I'm going to use some toilet roll and some watered down PVA, which is a technique I've learned from watching some of Chamwell's videos. Recommend going and checking out his videos if you can. Excellent quality Engage layout, really inspiring, and his building construction is absolutely great. But using toilet roll and watered down PVA, again, a super cheap fix to fill the gaps. And then what I'm going to do is use some second-hand filler from some work we had done on the house to run across the top of everything once the PVA is dry, and that will provide a nice hard shell onto which we can build the paint and then build the scenery. So as I said, all I'm doing is ripping up some toilet roll into small bits and just wedging that down into the hole. As it's pulled down, I'm then going to get some dilute PVA glue on my brush and just flood that over the toilet roll, and I'm hoping that will mean that it dries like rock. Really nothing more complicated to it than that. It's just building up the layers, making sure it's wedged down into place, filled it in the hole, and just building it up to the level of the landscape. Again, where I've got the foam board end pieces on the baseboard, I'm just doing the exact same thing, just wedging in with the brush. As you add the PVA, it gets gradually more and more malleable, and it's a really great, cheap way of filling some holes in here. Basically doing the same as products off the shelf called like Sculpt to Mould are doing, but in a slightly more basic way. Really great way of filling holes in your scenery and building up a ground layer for the price of a wipe. So with that in place, I'm going to leave it for 24 hours to allow it all to harden off. Shouldn't actually take too long given the temperature in the shed at the moment, but best leave it for as long as possible before putting any filler over the top. So I'm going to wind the video up here, it's getting on a bit now. Thanks for watching, and please do like and subscribe to us if you've enjoyed the video and you want to see future instalments in the construction and layout. Hopefully I'll be along again before too long to fill you in on further progress.